Charles, let's bring you back, because another bastion of the state here in UK, at least, the Church of England, is under a bit of pressure.
Ryan, it is. And the turmoil of safeguarding has reared its head again. This was an issue that cropped up in the summer of this year, 2023, and the Church Times reports here that the now defunct independent safeguarding board has decided, well, or rather members of it have decided that they're not going to cooperate with a review. So really, just the specifics of the situation are not as important as the overall theme. But in effect, an independent safeguarding board, which was stood up last year and has collapsed in pretty short order, just illustrates the point that the safeguarding practices within the church are evidently failing, but also in being put there in the first place, there's a sort of implicit suggestion that by writing this stuff down, it looks like the church is doing something. And in actual fact, safeguarding really is just the application of common sense and moral fortitude to any given situation, but specifically with regard to vulnerable people. It shouldn't need writing down, but also it shouldn't be forgotten that in writing it down, that doesn't mean that the job has been done. So we'll just have a quick look at some of the text from the ISB itself, which doesn't, as I say, actually exist anymore. So if we just put that on screen now, it's a great pains to say how it's an arm's length body, and it doesn't have influence brought to bear on it. So that if we click on one, then we can talk about the risks that it envisages. So it says the church has put the ISB in place to do work it cannot then frustrate. If the ISB as a driver of change lies too close to the church, there is a risk it could be absorbed. If it's too far away, it could gain insufficient traction. Well, for goodness sake, the ISB sat in Church House on Great Smith Street, which is the corporate headquarters of the Church of England. So how is it that it could be regarded as being at arm's length? Anyway, nevertheless, the crux of it seems to be that two individuals have fallen out with the Council of Archbishops, which is written up by the Church of England. So if we just put the next slide on screen, we can just see that they make a sort of rather oblique reference to the why. The critical bit here is that it refers to the independent inquiry into child sexual abuse, ICSA, into the Anglican Church in England and Wales in 2020. So although they're not giving the specific nature of the fallout this year, it seems very hard to imagine that the hangover from that investigation doesn't have something to do with this. And we'll then just look at the confusion of all these different bodies that somehow have got their finger in the same pie, and how on earth is that supposed to clarify the situation or indeed give good outcomes for the people that are supposed to be protected by all these safeguarding policies in the first place. So we've had the Independent Safeguarding Board, we've got the National Safeguarding Panel, and Meg Munn is the lady who's resigned from that. So we've got them, and then we'll just go on to the next slide, please, because we then see that now Baroness J has been brought in, and of course she's known because she chaired the ICSA inquiry. So again, in terms of sort of independence and arm's length and all the rest of it, it seems hard to understand exactly why she would be an appropriate person to be brought in, not least because she's going to be supported by the former secretary to ICSA, John O'Brien. So already a very muddled picture. And again, if we click on one to the next slide, just to get an overview of what the Church of England even means by safeguarding, they talk about promoting a safer environment, to safely recruit people, to respond promptly to everyday concerns, care pastorally for victims, care pastorally for those who are subject of concerns of allegations of abuse. What they avoid saying is that history suggests that the greatest risk posed is from those within the church and not outside of it. But of course, this is an area that they dare not venture into. They're in effect marking their own homework on this, and they're setting a dangerous precedent indeed. So we'll just look again at the latest iteration of the audit that's being conducted. So if we just put the next slide up on screen now, we can see that there's an independent safeguarding audit going on. So yet another organisation is involved with this, and they've been asked to carry out audits of the Church of England to make sure dioceses, cathedrals and palaces are doing all they can to create environments where everyone feels safe, valued and respected. All very well if it does actually do something, but it may not. So with this in mind, the utter sort of chaos and, in effect, refusal to address the issues that they have had with particularly child sexual abuse, it's small wonder that this coincides exactly with the secular society announcing the forthcoming bill in the House of Lords, which is to separate the church from the state, and that's going to be introduced by Lord Scriven, Paul Scriven. So if we just go to the next slide, we'll see what he's put on Twitter. So this is a bill. He's saying, I'm looking forward to introducing this bill that will finally deal with the Church of England being one of many religious organisations and not the state church with the privileges that brings. I think it's easy to understand where that sort of sentiment could come from, given the backdrop of the absolute fiasco surrounding safeguarding. And that's obviously just one of the small things that the church has dealt with ineffectively in the last few years. Just as a parting thought, we'll have a look at a bill going through Parliament at the moment, which may at first glance seem like it has nothing to do with the church. In actual fact, it will have everything to do with the church, and that is the Foetal Sentience Committee Bill. And if we click on one, we'll just see it's a bill that Lord Moylan has sponsored, and it says to make provision for a Foetal Sentience Committee to review current understanding of the sentience of the human fetus and to inform policymaking and for connected purposes. Now, the reason that pertains to the Church of England is that a considerable portion of their 10.1 billion investment portfolio is specifically given over to companies that are actively involved in genomics, into stem cell research, and indeed, therefore, the sentience of the human fetus is very, very directly relevant to that. So we'll be keeping an eye on where that bill gets to.
Charles, thank you very much for that. A lot to be discussed. We can do some more in UK Column Extra after the news today. But yes, there needs to be a lot of questions asked of the Church of England and where it's going and why it is becoming